Loneliness increases your risk of early death by 26%. That is roughly the same increase in mortality risk as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Not sadness, not depression, loneliness. The subjective feeling that your social connections are insufficient, regardless of how many people are actually around you. A person surrounded by coworkers, family members, and social media followers can be profoundly lonely. A person living alone with 2 close friends may not be lonely at all. The variable that matters is not the number of people in your life. It is whether your brain believes its social needs are being met. And when the brain decides they are not, it does not simply feel bad. It initiates a cascade of physiological changes that damage your body the way chronic stress, poor nutrition, and substance abuse do. This is the neuroscience of loneliness, and it explains why being alone and being lonely are not the same thing, and why one of them can kill you. The researcher who opened this field was John Cacioppo at the University of Chicago, who spent over 2 decades studying loneliness, not as an emotion, but as a biological signal. Cacioppo's central insight was that loneliness is not a feeling that arises because something is wrong with you. It is an alarm system as fundamental as hunger or thirst that evolved to tell you that a critical survival resource is missing. For a species that depends on cooperation for food, shelter, protection, and reproduction, social connection is not optional. It is infrastructure, and loneliness is the signal that the infrastructure is failing. Cacioppo called this the evolutionary theory of loneliness. The idea is that humans who felt distress when isolated from the group were more likely to seek reconnection and therefore more likely to survive. The ones who felt comfortable alone were more likely to remain exposed to predators, starvation, and environmental threats. The discomfort of loneliness was not a flaw. It was a survival advantage. The pain of isolation drives you back toward the group the way hunger drives you toward food. But here is where the system breaks down in the modern world. Hunger has a clear solution: eat. Thirst has a clear solution: drink. Loneliness does not have a simple behavioral fix, because the kind of connection the brain is seeking, deep, reciprocal, emotionally meaningful contact, cannot be produced on demand. You cannot solve loneliness by being in a room full of people. The signal is not about proximity. It is about perceived safety, belonging, and mutual investment. And when the signal stays active for too long, the brain begins to change in ways that make the problem worse. Cacioppo and his colleagues documented what happens neurologically during prolonged loneliness. The brain shifts into a state of hypervigilance. The threat detection system, centered on the amygdala, becomes more active. The brain begins scanning social interactions for signs of rejection, hostility, and exclusion, and it finds them everywhere, even where they do not exist. A neutral facial expression is interpreted as cold. A delayed text response is interpreted as disinterest. An uninvited acquaintance at a party is interpreted as rejection. The lonely brain does not perceive social reality accurately. It perceives it through a threat filter that distorts every interaction toward the negative. This is not paranoia. It is a documented cognitive bias called implicit hypervigilance for social threat, and it has been measured in brain imaging studies. The lonely brain is not making things up. It is applying a filter that was designed to protect you in a dangerous social environment, but in a safe one, it produces a constant stream of false alarms that push people away precisely when they need to draw them closer. Psychologist Louise Hawkley, who worked alongside Cacioppo for years, studied the behavioral consequences of this hypervigilance. She found that lonely individuals are more likely to interpret ambiguous social situations negatively, more likely to remember negative social events, and less likely to take social risks like initiating conversation, expressing vulnerability, or asking for help. The loneliness creates a behavioral pattern that looks, from the outside, like social withdrawal. But from the inside, it is self-protection. The brain has decided that social interaction is dangerous, and it is acting accordingly. This creates a feedback loop that researchers call the loneliness trap. You feel disconnected. Your brain enters threat mode. You interpret social signals negatively. You withdraw or behave defensively. Others respond to your withdrawal by pulling back. The disconnection deepens. The threat mode intensifies. And the cycle continues, each rotation making the next one harder to break. The physiological consequences of sustained loneliness are not metaphorical. Researcher Steve Cole at UCLA has studied the effects of loneliness on gene expression, the molecular level at which your DNA is read and translated into proteins. His research found that chronic loneliness produces a pattern he calls conserved transcriptional response to adversity. In lonely individuals, genes that promote inflammation are upregulated, meaning they become more active. Genes that produce antiviral responses and antibodies are downregulated, meaning they become less active. In simple terms, loneliness tells your immune system to prepare for wounds and bacterial infection, the kind of threats you face when you are physically isolated and exposed, while simultaneously reducing your defense against viruses, the kind of threats that spread through social contact. The immune system is reconfiguring itself for a world in which you are alone and in danger, even if you are sitting in an apartment in a city of 8 million people. This immune shift increases systemic inflammation, which is linked to cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, neurodegenerative disorders, and certain cancers. It is the biological mechanism behind the statistic that opened this video. Loneliness does not kill you through sadness, it kills you through inflammation. The effects on the brain itself are equally measurable. Researcher Julianne Holt-Lunstad at Brigham Young University conducted a landmark meta-analysis reviewing data from over 300,000 participants across 148 studies. Her conclusion was that social connection is as strong a predictor of survival as quitting smoking, and a stronger predictor than exercise, obesity treatment, or flu vaccination. People with strong social bonds had a 50% greater likelihood of survival over any given follow-up period compared to those who were isolated. 50%. This is not a wellness talking point. It is a measured, replicated effect size that holds across age groups, genders, and health conditions. And the trajectory is moving in the wrong direction. Survey data from multiple countries shows that reported loneliness has increased significantly over the past 2 decades, accelerated by the pandemic but already climbing before it. Younger adults, paradoxically, report the highest levels of loneliness despite having the most digital connections. The platforms that promise to connect everyone have, in many measurable ways, made the problem worse because they provide the appearance of connection without the neurological signature of it. Researcher Matthew Lieberman at UCLA has studied what social connection looks like in the brain. His work shows that meaningful social interaction activates the brain's reward circuitry, the same dopamine and opioid systems that respond to food, warmth, and safety. A genuine conversation with someone who knows you produces a neurochemical state that your brain classifies as safe. A like on a social media post does not. The brain can tell the difference between real connection and performative connection, even when you consciously cannot. This is why a person with 1,000 online followers and 0 close friends is lonelier than a person with no social media and 2 people they trust. The metric that matters is not reach, it is depth. And depth requires time, vulnerability, reciprocity, and physical presence, none of which can be delivered through a screen. So what does the research say actually helps? Cacioppo, before his death in 2018, outlined a framework he called the EASE model. Extend yourself by taking small social actions, not grand gestures, but micro-connections. A brief exchange with a neighbor, eye contact, and a genuine question. The action does not need to be impressive. It needs to be real. Have an action plan, meaning identify specific, repeatable social behaviors that become routine rather than requiring willpower each time. Seek out others who share your interests, because shared activity provides a low-pressure context for connection. And expect the best, which is the hardest part, because the lonely brain has been trained to expect rejection. That last element is critical. The hypervigilant threat filter must be consciously overridden. Cacioppo's research showed that cognitive behavioral interventions targeting the negative social interpretations produced by loneliness were more effective than simply increasing social contact. Putting a lonely person in more social situations without addressing the threat filter often makes things worse, because the filter distorts every new interaction into further evidence that people cannot be trusted. The loneliness is not about the number of people around you. It is about whether your brain believes it is safe. And safety, for a social species, means being known, being needed, and believing that someone would notice if you disappeared. You are carrying a signal system that was built to push you toward the group because the group was where survival lived. That signal does not know about cities or social media or open-plan offices full of people looking at separate screens. It only knows whether the connections it is monitoring feel sufficient. And when they do not, it begins preparing your body for a world in which you are alone. The 15 cigarettes statistic is not an exaggeration. It is a measurement. And unlike smoking, loneliness does not come with a warning label, which may be why it is now the largest unaddressed public health crisis in the developed world. The solution is not more people. It is deeper connection with fewer of them. And the first step is recognizing that the discomfort you feel is not a flaw. It is an alarm, and it is telling you exactly what you need. There is one final finding that puts the modern loneliness epidemic into sharp focus. Researcher Twenge at San Diego State University has tracked generational trends in loneliness and social behavior across decades of data. Her analysis shows that the sharpest increase in loneliness began not with the pandemic, not with remote work, but with the mass adoption of the smartphone around 2012. The generation that grew up with a smartphone in their pocket from adolescence reports levels of loneliness, anxiety, and social disconnection that are unprecedented in the data. Twenge's interpretation is not that smartphones caused loneliness directly. It is that they displaced the activities that prevent it. Every hour spent scrolling is an hour not spent in face-to-face conversation. Every evening watching content alone is an evening not spent with another person. The phone did not create the loneliness. It filled the time that would have otherwise been filled by the connections that keep loneliness at bay. This maps directly onto Lieberman's neuroscience. The brain needs real connection to produce the neurochemical state of social safety. Scrolling produces dopamine through novelty, but it does not produce the oxytocin and endogenous opioids that genuine human contact generates. The brain is being fed the wrong currency, and no amount of the wrong currency will satisfy the need. You are not lonely because something is wrong with you. You are lonely because a system that was built to keep you alive is detecting that something essential is missing. And it is right. The question is whether you will listen to the alarm or continue scrolling past it. 15 cigarettes a day. That is what it costs. And the treatment is not a prescription. It is a conversation with someone who actually knows your name.